It was one of those nights when the road stretched endlessly before us, the darkness swallowing everything in its wake. Sarah and I had been driving for hours, our weary eyes straining to catch a glimpse of civilization amidst the desolate landscape. Finally, the neon glow of a roadside motel pierced through the night, offering a flicker of hope in the abyss. Pulling into the gravel lot, we exchanged tired smiles, relief washing over us as we stumbled out of the car. The motel appeared like any other, its faded sign casting an eerie glow over the deserted parking area. Ignoring the faint sense of unease gnawing at the edges of my mind, I helped Sarah gather our bags, eager to escape the suffocating confines of the vehicle. The lobby greeted us with a musty smell, the air thick with the scent of old cigarettes and stale coffee. A tired-looking clerk glanced up from behind the reception desk, his expression blank as he handed over a set of keys without a word. We exchanged uneasy glances, the silence hanging heavy in the air as we made our way to our assigned room. Inside, the walls seemed to close in around us, the dim lighting casting long shadows across the threadbare carpet. Sarah flicked on the television in an attempt to dispel the oppressive atmosphere, but the images flickering across the screen only served to heighten our unease. As the night wore on, sleep eluded us, the minutes dragging by in agonizing slowness. Each creak of the floorboard sent shivers down my spine, my senses on high alert for any sign of danger. It was then that I heard it, the muffled sounds of movement coming from the room next door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to listen. Sarah's hand found mine in the darkness, her grip tight with fear. We held our breath, waiting for the noise to subside, but it only grew louder, more frantic with each passing moment. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized what was happening. The person next door wasn't just a weary traveler seeking shelter for the night. They were someone far more sinister, someone who had something to hide. I glanced at Sarah, her wide eyes reflecting my own fear. Without a word, we made a silent pact to leave, to get as far away from this place as possible. But as I reached for the door, a sudden knock shattered the silence, sending shockwaves through the room. We froze, our breath catching in our throats as the sound echoed through the empty space. It came again, louder this time, more insistent. With trembling hands, I edged towards the door, every fiber of my being screaming for me to run, to hide, to do anything but open it. But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I turned the handle, the door creaking open to reveal the darkness beyond. And there, standing in the dim glow of the hallway, was a figure cloaked in shadow. My heart plummeted as I recognized the face of a man whose image had been plastered across every news outlet for weeks. He was a fugitive, a dangerous criminal on the run from the law. Before I could react, he lunged forward, his eyes wild with desperation. I stumbled backward, my mind racing as I fumbled for the words to scream, to plead for help. But it was too late. In an instant, his hands were around my throat, squeezing the life from me with a strength born of desperation. I gasped for air, my vision swimming as darkness closed in around me. And as I struggled against the iron grip of the fugitive, panic surged through my veins, adrenaline coursing through my body. Sarah's terrified screams filled the air, a symphony of fear that echoed off the walls of our cramped motel room. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I fought back, clawing at his face, desperate to break free from his grasp. But he was relentless, his grip unyielding as he bore down on me with all the fury of a cornered animal. In the chaos, time seemed to stand still, each second stretching out into an eternity of agony and terror. I could feel the life draining from me, my lungs burning for air, my vision narrowing to a pinprick of light. But just when I thought all hope was lost, a sudden burst of noise shattered the silence, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. The fugitive froze, his grip loosening for the briefest of moments as he glanced towards the door. It was our chance, our fleeting opportunity to escape the clutches of death. With a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched myself free from his grasp, my body screaming in protest as I stumbled towards the door. Sarah was right behind me, her hand gripping mine with a strength born of sheer determination. Together, we raced down the dimly lit hallway, the sound of our pounding footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind us, the fugitive roared in frustration, his footsteps thundering after us as he gave chase. But we were faster, fueled by the primal instinct to survive, to escape the nightmare that had unfolded before us. With every step, the world seemed to blur around us, the hallway stretching out endlessly before our eyes. But just when it felt like we couldn't run any further, we burst through the doors of the motel, the cool night air washing over us like a balm. For a moment we stood there, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. But there was no time to rest, no time to catch our breath. We had to keep running, to put as much distance between us and the fugitive as possible. With newfound resolve, we raced into the darkness, our footsteps echoing off the deserted streets as we disappeared into the night. And as we fled into the unknown, I knew that this would be a night we would never forget, a night that would haunt us for the rest of our days. Story 2. As I drove down the winding country roads, the sense of isolation grew with every passing mile. It was a journey to a distant family reunion, a trip I had embarked upon with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness descended upon the landscape, my excitement waned, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The GPS signal flickered and died, leaving me stranded in the depths of the unknown. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I realized I was lost, the unfamiliar surroundings stretching out before me like a labyrinth of uncertainty. It was then that I spotted the flickering neon sign of a roadside motel, its glow cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. Relieved, I pulled into the gravel lot, the crunch of tires beneath me echoing in the silence of the night. Stepping out of the car, I shivered in the cool night air, a sense of foreboding settling over me like a heavy blanket. The motel loomed before me, its facade weathered and worn, the windows dark and empty. With a hesitant step, I approached the reception desk, my footsteps echoing off the linoleum floors. Behind the counter stood a man, his features obscured by the dim lighting of the lobby. He greeted me with a toothy grin, his eyes glinting with an unsettling intensity. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "What brings you to our humble establishment?" I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Something about the man set my teeth on edge, a sense of wrongness that lingered in the air like a foul odor. "Just passing through," I replied, my voice betraying none of the unease swirling within me. "I'm in need of a room for the night." The man's grin widened, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. He reached beneath the counter, producing a set of keys with a flourish. Of course," he said, his voice dripping with honeyed charm. "We have just the room for you. Follow me." With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I trailed after him down a dimly lit hallway, the shadows closing in around us like hungry predators. He led me to a room at the far end, its door flanked by peeling paint and cracked plaster. "Here we are," he said, his grin never faltering. "I hope you find everything to your liking." I forced a smile, the weight of his gaze bearing down on me like a physical presence. As he turned to leave, I caught sight of something glinting on the shelves behind him, a collection of trinkets and baubles that seemed out of place in such a rundown motel. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing towards the display with a flick of my hand. The man's grin faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something dark passing over his features before it was gone, replaced by that same sickly smile. "Oh, just odds and ends," he replied, his voice tight. "Things left behind by previous guests." I nodded, though the unease in the pit of my stomach only grew stronger. With a final nod, the man disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone in the darkness. The room felt like a tomb, the air thick with tension and the faint scent of decay. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to run, to escape the clutches of the sinister motel manager who now stood before me, his presence suffocating. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper as I struggled to find my voice. "What do you want?" I managed to croak out, the words barely audible in the oppressive silence. The manager's grin widened, his eyes gleaming with a madness that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, just a little something to remember you by," he said, his voice dripping with malice. Before I could react, he lunged forward, his hands reaching out to grab me with a strength that belied his wiry frame. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest as I fought to break free from his grasp. But he was relentless, his grip like iron as he pinned me against the wall, his foul breath hot against my skin. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct to survive driving me to fight back with every ounce of strength I possessed. With a surge of adrenaline, I lashed out, striking him with all the force I could muster. He staggered back, his grin faltering for the briefest of moments as surprise flickered across his face. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my ears as I raced down the dimly lit hallway. Behind me, I could hear the manager's enraged shouts echoing off the walls, his footsteps thundering after me like the pounding of a drum. I didn't dare look back, my only thought to escape, to put as much distance between myself and that cursed motel as possible. I burst through the doors into the cool night air, the rush of freedom washing over me like a tidal wave. But even as I fled into the darkness, I knew that the nightmare was far from over. The memory of the manager's twisted grin haunted my dreams, a specter of fear that lingered in the shadows of my mind. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted by something dark and malevolent. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the events of that night were nothing more than a fevered dream born of fear and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew the truth. The motel manager was real, and he was out there, waiting, biding his time until the moment was right to strike again. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the moment when he would return to finish what he had started. But he never did. Instead, he remained a shadowy presence in the back of my mind, a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the darkness, waiting to ensnare the unwary and the unsuspecting. And as the years passed, I learned to live with the fear, to accept it as a part of who I was. But deep down, I knew that I would never truly be free, that the memory of that night would haunt me for the rest of my days, a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of our reality. Story 3. The night was thick with silence as I pulled into the motel parking lot, the neon sign flickering eerily in the darkness. Exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders, my eyelids heavy from hours of driving. I longed for nothing more than to sink into bed and let sleep claim me. The motel itself was a rundown affair, its paint peeling and its windows boarded up. But in the dead of night, with no other options in sight, it seemed like a sanctuary. Ignoring the faint sense of unease prickling at the back of my mind, I gathered my bags and made my way to the reception desk. The clerk behind the counter eyed me warily, his gaze lingering a moment too long. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the chill that crept down my spine. "Just one room for the night, please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The clerk nodded, his expression unreadable as he handed me a set of keys. "Room 12, he said simply, his voice devoid of warmth. With a sense of trepidation, I made my way down the dimly lit hallway, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. Room 12 loomed before me, its door ominously ajar. With a shaky hand, I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small and cramped, the air stale and musty. I sighed, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that clung to me like a second skin. But as I settled onto the bed, a strange sound echoed through the walls, faint and distant. At first, I dismissed it as the creaking of old pipes or the rustling of leaves in the wind. But as the night wore on, the noise grew louder, more insistent. It was a rhythmic thumping, like the sound of someone pounding on a door. Curiosity gnawed at me, driving me to investigate. With a sense of trepidation, I made my way to the door and pressed my ear against it, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. And that's when I heard it, a woman's voice, muffled and desperate, pleading for help. My blood ran cold as the realization sank in. Someone was in trouble, someone was in danger, and I was the only one who could help. Without a second thought, I flung open the door and dashed into the hallway, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. The noise led me to the room across the hall. Its door cracked open just enough to allow a sliver of light to spill out into the darkness. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the stench of fear. And in the corner, huddled on the floor, was a woman, her eyes wide with terror as she stared up at me. Before she could speak, a voice cut through the silence, cold and menacing. "What do you think you're doing?" it said, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to see a man standing in the doorway, his features twisted into a sneer. He was tall and imposing, his eyes dark and unfathomable. In that moment, I knew that he was the source of the woman's fear, the one who held her captive in this dingy motel room. But I refused to back down, refused to let fear dictate my actions. With every ounce of courage I possessed, I stepped forward and confronted him, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "Let her go," I said, my words ringing out like a challenge in the stillness of the room. For a moment there was silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. And then, with a suddenness that left me reeling, the man lunged forward, his hands reaching out to grab me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to keep him at bay. But he was relentless, his grip like iron as he pinned me against the wall, his breath hot against my skin. In that moment I knew that I was in over my head, that I had stumbled into a situation far more dangerous than I could have imagined. But I refused to give up, refused to let fear consume me. With a surge of adrenaline, I fought back, striking out with all the strength I could muster. But the man was too strong, too powerful, and I knew that I was no match for him. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the man leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered the words that would haunt me for the rest of my days. "You're going to wish you were dead," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I knew that he was right. The horrors that awaited me in that motel room would forever scar me, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of our reality. Days turned into nights, and nights into an endless cycle of terror within the confines of the desolate motel room. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly, each passing moment marked by the relentless torment inflicted upon me by the man and the clerk. They reveled in their power over me, their cruelty knowing no bounds as they subjected me to unspeakable horrors. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of defiance burned within me. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against me, I clung to the hope of escape like a lifeline, refusing to surrender to the despair that threatened to consume me. With each passing day, I searched for any opportunity to break free from my captor's grasp, to find a weakness in their defenses that I could exploit. But they were vigilant, their watchful eyes never straying far from me, their every move calculated to ensure that I remained firmly under their control. Yet even in the depths of despair, a glimmer of hope remained. It came in the form of the woman who had shared my ordeal, her unwavering resolve a source of strength in the face of adversity. Together we forged a bond born of shared suffering, united in our determination to survive. As the days stretched on, we whispered words of encouragement to one another, our voices a beacon of defiance in the suffocating darkness of the motel room. We shared our hopes and fears, our dreams of freedom serving as a balm to soothe our battered souls. But despite our best efforts, escape remained elusive, each attempt thwarted by the man and the clerk, their cruelty escalating with each passing day as they sought to break our spirits and crush our will to resist. And then, just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a glimmer of opportunity presented itself. It came in the form of a momentary lapse in vigilance, a brief window of opportunity that we seized with both hands. With hearts pounding and adrenaline coursing through our veins, the woman and I sprang into action, our movements swift and sure as we overpowered our captors and made a break for freedom. It was a desperate bid for survival, fueled by the primal instinct to escape at any cost. But even as we raced down the dimly lit hallway, our footsteps echoing off the walls, we knew that our journey was far from over. The man and the clerk were in hot pursuit, their shouts of rage echoing in the corridors behind us. We sprinted down the narrow hallway, our hearts thundering in our chests, adrenaline pumping through our veins. With each step, the distant sound of our pursuers grew louder, driving us onward with a frantic urgency. As we reached the end of the hallway, a shadow loomed before us, blocking our path. It was the clerk, his face contorted in a malevolent sneer. "Going somewhere, are we?" he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. But we refused to be deterred. With a fierce determination, we barreled past him, pushing through the darkness and into the night beyond. The cool night air washed over us, a welcome relief after the suffocating confines of the motel. We ran blindly into the darkness, guided only by the distant glimmer of streetlights in the distance. With each passing moment, our hope of escape grew stronger, driving us forward through the inky blackness of the night. But our freedom was short-lived. Just as we thought we had outpaced our pursuers, they descended upon us like vengeful shadows, their hands reaching out to drag us back into the darkness. With a sense of dread, we realized that we had been led into a trap, that our escape had been nothing more than a cruel illusion. And as the man and the clerk closed in around us, their laughter ringing in our ears, we knew that our nightmare was far from over. For days we were subjected to unspeakable horrors, our bodies broken and our spirits shattered by the relentless cruelty of our captors. We existed in a nightmarish limbo, trapped in a never-ending cycle of pain and despair. But even in the darkest depths of our torment, a glimmer of hope remained. It was the knowledge that we were not alone, that we had each other to lean on in our darkest hour. And together we clung to that flicker of hope, determined to survive against all odds. And then, just when it seemed that all hope was lost, salvation came in the form of a brave soul who stumbled upon our prison of despair. With courage and determination, they fought back against our captors, driving them back into the shadows from whence they came. In the chaos of our rescue, we were whisked away to safety, our bodies battered and bruised, but our spirits unbroken. And as we emerged from the darkness into the light of day, we vowed to never forget the horrors we had endured, to honor the memory of those who had fallen victim to the darkness that lurked within the walls of that forsaken motel.